sometimes the only solution to a problem is an attitude problem. That's what this video is going to be about. How sometimes you're going to reach a state of being where you just can't be asked. And even though that may be culturally frowned upon, because we're supposed to care about everything so diligently and with such discipline, a lot of the time when you get to the point of can't be asked, it's a sign from your nervous system and from your realness that you need to course correct. A lot of the time we don't listen to that signal, and it makes life more complicated and full of friction and misery than it needs to be. And so really that's what we're going to talk about in this video. How to tune in to your natural ability to not be asked about things, so that you can live your real life and move in a direction that actually flows instead of feels like you're forcing everything. You've probably reached the point where you CBA, can't be asked, at some stage in your life, because it's a natural thing that we all have, a natural signal that we all have, which tells us whether something's real or unreal in most cases. We'll get into the distinctions later in the video. It might have been a job. You might have had a job that you just couldn't be asked with, and so you forced yourself to try and be asked because of necessity. Maybe it was a relationship. There's somebody in your life that has all kinds of personality quirks, let's say, little issues and niggles that you tried to be understanding towards and put up with, but eventually you just reached that point of CBA and you didn't want to put any more energy into it. If we don't listen to the CBA signal and change something, then life always gets worse. And that's what we need to talk about in this video. How to listen to the signal, and then how to decide what we're going to do about that information that it's presenting us with. Well, this is an exceptionally mossy tree. Just sharing that with you folk. A very real example from my life is when I was younger, I used to end up dating these girls, or women, that had a fixation on being right about every little detail. Over the years, I realized that when people are obsessed with being right and really attaching to their opinions, it's because they have a lot of shame and they need to be right about things to keep the shame at bay. Back then, I didn't realize that. And I would get in these pointless, stupid, trivial arguments about who was wrong, who was right, about things that didn't even really matter. But eventually I started to feel the can't be asked signal arising within me when these arguments would take place. And so instead of engaging in the argument, I would just feel like I couldn't be asked. I was like, what is the point? There's an old saying that if you argue with an idiot, it makes you an idiot. And I really started to feel that. I was like, if I give any energy to this argument, then I'm an idiot, because it's pointless. We're arguing about washing the dishes, taking the laundry out on a certain time, or some trivial nonsense thing, and it doesn't even matter. And the more energy I feed into this, the more of my own time I'm wasting, but the more I'm kind of encouraging this person to keep arguing and getting fixated on what's right, which doesn't even matter. As the saying goes, you can be right all the time or you can be happy. And so I just reached this point of CBA, and I just felt no inclination or motivation to feed into it whatsoever. And ultimately that's when I knew that the relationship was done. This tree looks like it's definitely seen some better days. Another example from my own life is there's been a few times where I've known people that have, let's say, issues, anger issues, or moral issues, just all kinds of issues that people can have. And I don't judge. And I've got into a situation where I've told myself something like, this person only has these issues because they've been through all this hard stuff in life, and hurt people, and you got to understand and be compassionate towards people's quirks, because people pick up quirks because of emotional reasons. And it's totally true. I stand by that. You should give everybody a chance. But sometimes what's happened with these people that I've given a chance to is all of those quirks and those problems just ended up being something that I had to tolerate instead of being able to accept. Tolerate because it would cause all kinds of problems in the relationship. They would have all kinds of drama caused by these things that they needed to work on themselves. And by keeping them around and by being too compassionate, I would just end up creating tension for myself and enabling their behavior. Let's say it like that. Eventually, what happened in every case is I would eventually get annoyed of having to tolerate this stuff, and then the annoyance would evolve into a CBA, into a can't be asked. And so there'd be some drama, or the phone would keep ringing, or whatever it is, and I just couldn't be asked feeding into it. And I used to try and force myself, because I had this idea that you should be asked and you should tolerate all kinds of things. But then I started listening to the CBA signal, and I realized I couldn't be asked because I didn't need to be asked. That wasn't my responsibility. I was being egotistical. And so by listening to my own CBA, I was able to GTFO and go focus on something real instead. What's really important to know is that when you reach that CBA stage, it doesn't mean that you've been lazy or apathetic, although sometimes laziness can disguise itself as CBA. We tell ourselves we can't be asked, but really we've just been lazy because we're scared to get out of our comfort zone. But when you really reach that CBA stage, what's happened is that you've gone through a process that has reached completion. And the process is figuring out all of the little details about a situation or a person or whatever it is, and then reaching that point where your body, your unconscious mind, and your nervous system as a whole understand the truth about it, and they understand that the truth of whatever it is isn't aligned with where you need to go or what you need to do to be real and live your own life. And this is why it's a signal. It's a signal that you have tried in a real way, hopefully, to make something work, but deep down, when all the processing has been processed, you realize it's just not for you. And so when that signal pops up, it doesn't mean you don't care. It just means you need to go find something that you care about in a more real way. The main reason that we don't listen to the CBA signal and try and force ourselves to be asked about things is because of our ego. The self-image that we have created for ourselves unconsciously normally because of our underlying emotional stuff. There's a river here flowing along. River is a strong word, but I might drown, and I'm sure some people would be very happy about that given the topic of this video, but I'm not going to risk it. But anyway, we don't listen to the CBA signal because of our ego, the way we want to see ourselves. And so when we engage in a pointless argument that we already know we can't be asked with, it's probably because our ego wants us to win the argument, or we want to see ourselves as somebody who's so morally virtuous and understanding that we are going to reason things out, even when our nervous system and body is telling us that it's pointless. It's because of our self-image, the little box that we put ourselves in that causes us to go against reality. When we're keeping people in our lives that have triggered our CBA signal, again, it's because of the ego. We probably feel we need to rescue that person, or we want to see ourselves as being so tolerant and virtuous that we can handle anything. But that's not real. We're not being real with ourselves because we're not setting healthy, energetic boundaries, but we're not being real with other people too, because we're just keeping them around even though our body is telling us not to, and our mind and our emotions and everything, once the CBA signal has been triggered, we're keeping them around to use them because it makes us feel good about ourselves. Even though there's drama and personality defects and all those kind of things, it's not real. And so when you don't listen to the CBA signal, it's because you're holding on to some image of yourself, some signal, sorry, some noise, let's say, that is not the pure signal of yourself, that the CBA signal is an extension of. And so when you hear the CBA call from within, you need to pay some serious attention, because it's trying to bring you back home and put you on track with your real life. When we don't listen to the CBA signal, then we're not listening to our realness. We're listening to all the little fragments of ourselves that make life more and more unreal, the more that we let them guide us through life. And so the more we ignore the CBA signal and try and pretend that we are somebody who is arsed when we're absolutely not arsed, the more that we end up being disconnected from ourselves. Normally what happens is we end up sending the CBA signal, or that side of us, into exile. It becomes part of the shadow self. And we try and care about all these things that we don't care about, but we just end up bringing friction to our lives. And friction always turns to frustration on a long enough timeline, and frustration just turns to misery. And so if we're unhappy chronically, and we can't really see any reason why on the surface of things, because it's not a situational thing like someone's just died or something, it's just a chronic misery, then the odds are you've been forcing yourself to be asked about things that you're absolutely not asked about. And so you need to start bringing that signal out of exile and listening to what your nervous system and your unconscious mind and your body and everything are telling you about the changes you need to make or the things you need to walk away from. Because that's how you're going to put yourself back on a real path, and you're going to allow yourself to start moving towards wholeness and realness instead of just being fragmented and then having to deal with and tolerate all of the consequences of treating that fragmentation as the truth. A good workable definition of CBA mode, in the way that we've been talking about it in this video, is that it's the natural withdrawal of real energy from an unreal situation. And so ultimately what it means is you reach that point of no return, the done mode, where you're just done with something, where your nervous system, etc., is no longer naturally going to give energy to the situation. The real energy, the life force energy that is supposed to carry you forward into deeper wholeness and truth and connection with the real people and the real things in your life. It's a natural withdrawal of that energy. And if you don't understand it like that, and you're filtering it through the ego and all kinds of unreal ideas about what it means to be a good person or to be moral or whatever, then you just end up trying to force yourself to put that real energy in places where it doesn't belong. But you can't do that, because it just means that you're going to be fighting yourself, and that's just going to cause all kinds of inner resistance, which leads to the friction, frustration and misery that I talked about, and it puts you on a path you don't want to be on. And so the CBA signal is really just feedback from yourself and life about what you're doing with your energy. And your time, energy and attention in general are the most valuable assets that you have, because life is not going to last forever in this form. You're going to be dead one day. And so if you're wasting your time, energy and attention on unreal things because you think you have to be asked when you already know you're not asked, then your life is no longer yours. And so if you want to reclaim your life and start feeling real, then learn to CBA when the time is appropriate. Again, don't trick yourself into thinking that you can't be asked just because you're scared of getting out of your comfort zone. That's different. What I'm talking about is this embodied feeling that you've reached the end of the line with something. There is nothing wrong with reaching the end of the line when it comes to something being unreal. And if you can listen to that signal and act on it, you're going to keep evolving and growing and becoming who you're supposed to be. Another very mossy tree for your collection, or for our collection. Isn't that wonderful? Whoa, nearly died. One thing that's relevant and worth knowing is that there's a distinction, an important one, between CBA, can't be asked, and NFG, no F's given. Both are important actually, because one of the things that upsets a lot of people in life or causes them to go down the wrong path or to hold back is that they give too many F's about things that they shouldn't give F's about, things that don't matter, people's opinions, all that kind of stuff. In comparison to CBA, NFG is different in the sense that can't be asked is about protecting your energetic boundaries from the things in the world. You are going out there, hopefully in a real way, and interacting with the world. But when you reach that point where your tolerance is peaked, or you're putting up with things that you don't need to put up with, you set an energetic boundary. If you can listen to the CBA signal, that's really important, which is the whole point of this video. NFG is the thing that allows you to get out there in the first place. What it basically means is instead of being worried about the external world, you're not letting your internal limiting beliefs and stuff like that stop you from going out there in the first place and expressing something real. And so really the sweet spot is that you have a healthy relationship with both. You can NFG when you need to, and you can CBA when you need to, and then you can keep moving, growing, getting out of your comfort zone, taking action that's aligned with your vision, and growing real without holding yourself back or letting the world hold you back by putting energy into unreal situations that don't deserve it. So after having said all of these terrible things that I've said, I want to leave you with this, which is to learn to trust your CBA signal. If you are genuinely in a situation that you can't be asked with, and you're not fooling yourself, it's not ego resistance, i.e. you're trying to avoid the truth of some situation, but you've just reached that limit of putting the energy that's available to you into it, then learn to trust the can't be asked signal. Learn to make a change. Learn to walk away. Give me something real, or GTFO. Learn to get away from the things that you are forcing yourself to be asked with when you're only doing it because of your own ego stuff and your conditioning. Ask yourself, after watching this video, maybe journal if you're into that, what are you forcing yourself to be asked about that you don't need to be asked about? Because life is too short to go against the wisdom of your body, the wisdom of your unconscious mind, the wisdom of your nervous system, and most importantly, the wisdom of your realness. Sometimes, in fact often, that CBA signal is just your realness calling you back home. So don't be scared to listen to it. Don't force yourself to be asked about things you don't need to be asked about. Make a change. So I hope that helps you. If anyone wants to talk to me, you can book a call on my website. There's a link. I'll give you a free coaching session for Realness. But other than that, it's a beautiful day here on planet Earth. I wish you nothing but peace and flow. So stay real out there. Boom.